Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're diving into a massive challenge that pretty much every leader faces, but we're going to look at it specifically through the lens of TVET. That's Technical and Vocational Education and Training Leadership. We're talking about how to take all that messy, overwhelming empathy data and transform it into sharp, actionable solutions. Honestly, if you've ever felt completely buried under a mountain of interview notes or stakeholder feedback and just thought, how on earth do I turn this qualitative chaos into an actual path forward, especially when you're on the hook to generate new income streams, well, you're in exactly the right place. So let's just jump right in.
You've been there, right? You sit down, you listen, you take absolutely copious amounts of notes. But what happens next? All too often, that incredibly valuable workplace feedback gets collected, put in a nice little folder, and then it just gathers dust. And why does that happen? Because raw data is literally just too overwhelming. When you're staring at page after page of individual frustrations, differing opinions, conflicting needs, it feels impossible to know where to start. Data paralysis sets in, and, well, the status quo ends up winning by default. Now, to actually capture all this feedback in the first place, TVET principals in our source program use this fantastic human-centered design tool called the empathy map. Basically, during their field assignments, they sit down with staff, students, maybe local employers, and they track what these stakeholders say, think, do, and feel. Those are the 4 quadrants of a classic empathy map. It is a brilliant way to build empathy, but let's be honest here. It results in what we can politely call a messy desk. Suddenly, you've got this massive pile of distinct human experiences scattered across hundreds of chaotic, overlapping sticky notes. It's rich, it's real data, but on its own, it's not an income-generating activity. It is just pure chaos.
So to navigate this overwhelming pile of data, we actually need a really strong leadership philosophy. Now, you might be wondering, why on earth are we looking at a personal leadership book to solve a data problem? Well, it's because before we can systematically design a new income stream or solve some big institutional challenge, we have to manage ourselves. We have to manage our own paradigms. Stephen R. Covey's legendary framework, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, gives us the exact mental models we need. It helps us look at that messy desk of complaints and see it not as a massive headache, but as the raw material for true innovation.
Covey captures this pivot beautifully. He says the way we see the problem is the problem. And this right here is the absolutely crucial paradigm pivot. Think about it. If a TVET principal looks at their empathy maps and says, my stakeholders just complain way too much and we never have enough funding, well, they're stuck. The paradigm is the prison. But if they pivot, if they move from just passively looking at the data to actively synthesizing it, they take back control. They stop seeing those constraints as roadblocks and actually start seeing them as design parameters. Covey actually quotes Albert Einstein in his book to really drive this home. The significant problems we face cannot be solved at the same level of thinking we were at when we created them. If an institution is facing, say, systemic funding issues, they absolutely cannot rely on quick fixes, or what Covey brilliantly calls social aspirin. A Band-Aid isn't going to cure a chronic condition. Leaders need a fundamentally new level of thinking. They need a highly structured process to elevate their mindset and the mindset of their teams to actually get in there and solve the root issues.
And this mindset shift, it builds directly into a practical application. In the 5-day blended program for these TVET leaders, day 4 is really where the magic happens. We walk them through this logical chaos to clarity funnel. Step 1, they synthesize the empathy data. Step 2, they define the core problem. Step 3, they ideate solutions. And step 4, they build a lean prototype. It's essentially an exact roadmap. It shows exactly how we take that messy pile of interview notes and turn it directly into a viable lean IGO canvas, which, by the way, is basically just a 1-page business plan for your new income stream.
Okay, let's zoom in on that first step. Picture this. You walk into a workshop room and you've got these table groups of 5 to 6 principals. They're pulling their real empathy maps from their field assignments. They physically take all those sticky notes and observations and they just start clustering them. They're hunting for patterns across different institutions and totally different stakeholders. For example, maybe the students at one college and the local employers across town are actually expressing the exact same frustration about, say, a lack of practical after-hours skills training. This physical clustering takes all that chaos and groups it into clear, manageable themes. But here is the crucial point. What happens next in the define phase? Because let's face it, you can't solve 15 broad thematic clusters all at once. It's just not going to happen. This step forces leaders to narrow down those broad clusters into singular, razor-sharp points of focus. Every table has to distill their insights down to just 2 or 3 highly focused problem or opportunity statements. This is literally the narrowest point of our funnel, and it's really hard work. It requires saying no to a lot of completely valid complaints just so you can say a much bigger yes to the absolute most critical institutional opportunity.
Now, once you finally have that sharp problem statement, you have to pivot. If you just sit there staring at a problem, human nature kind of kicks in and we tend to feel defeated by it. So this is where we flare the funnel right back out using a how might we question. Converting a rigid, heavy problem statement into a how might we question is honestly a psychological trick just as much as it is a design tool. The word how assumes that a solution actually exists. Might gives us permission to just explore without any judgment. And we means we're going to do this together, collaboratively. It instantly shifts your brain from feeling totally stuck to actively seeking possibilities.
Just look at the contrast here. On the left side, we have your classic, unhelpful, dead-end statement. We need more money. Right? It's a complaint. It completely shuts down creative thinking. But now, look at the right. How might we use our welding workshop after hours to serve the local community? That is a highly effective catalytic question. It takes an existing asset, the welding workshop, and directly links it to a real community need. It's specific enough that you can take action on it, but it's open enough to invite, a dozen different creative solutions. It's a total game changer.
And this brings us perfectly back to Covey's habit number 6, synergy. Synergy is basically the principle of creative cooperation. It's the idea that diverse groups will always outperform individuals when it comes to ideation. By asking a collaborative how might we question, a principal isn't just sitting alone in their office pulling their hair out trying to solve a funding gap. No, they're bringing cross-departmental colleagues together. You get the welding instructor, the finance officer, the community liaison. They all look at that exact same question, and because they have such diverse backgrounds, they spark off each other to build something entirely new. Covey actually refers to the result of this kind of synergy as the third alternative. So it's not my way and it's not your way, it is a higher, much better way. By framing the right how might we question, leaders can actually guide their teams to discover this third alternative. In the context of our TVET leaders, it means getting past that terrible false choice of either, exploiting the community for cash or quietly going bankrupt. Instead, by adopting a win-win philosophy, they design an income-generating activity that creates mutual benefits. The institution gets its much-needed funding, and the local community gets a valuable, affordable service that they actually asked for. Win-win!
So once that perfect catalytic question is framed, the energy in the workshop just explodes into the ideate phase. The immediate next steps involve rapid brainstorming, and I mean rapid. Absolutely no filtering is allowed. Every single idea goes on a sticky note. This divergent, cross-departmental thinking is literally the engine of innovation. Then, after the tables have generated dozens of these synergistic ideas, they use a really simple, democratic voting system to shortlist the absolute strongest, most viable concepts. It's an incredible process. They've successfully navigated all the way from chaotic, unfiltered raw data to a clear, actionable, peer-tested concept that is ready for prototyping.
As we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with a provocative thought to challenge your own paradigm today. Look at your own messy desk. Think about those chronic problems, the stakeholder complaints, or the funding constraints in your own organization. What dead-end statement have you just been accepting as reality? And more importantly, what messy problem in your organization needs to be transformed into a catalytic how might we question today? Try applying this exact funnel to your own data and just watch how quickly you can move your team from chaos to absolute clarity. Thanks so much for joining me, and keep seeking those third alternatives.